Okay, so let's begin by honoring those of Ra. That sixth density, social memory complex, those beings, that being. Thank you for this material. Thank you for your dedication to the law of one, to oneness, for communicating this information. Thank you to our friends at LL Research for publishing this material and stewarding it so well. Big gratitude. Okay, so we are reading session 19 today. The topics in session 19. Let's see. I don't know if I can share. I don't know how to share the screen. I'll just read it. We have the topics of transition from 2D to 3D. 3 types of 2D entities that are capable of harvest to 3D. The cause of 2D to 3D evolution. Natural versus assisted 2D to 3D transition. Confederation aid. Newly formed 3D body complex, catalyst and logos. Origins of the negative path. Switching paths and those not yet choosing a path. Polarity and electricity analogy, the cultivation of personal power, and the roots of astrology. So that's an overview of session 19. And we can begin at 19.0. Anybody care to read?
I can.
Great. I think maybe read the first 3. That seems like a lot to digest.
Yeah, there's a lot in this session. This may be one of those halfsies. Part 1, part 2.
Totally.
I like when we do that too, because we get to, unpack it a lot more.
Yeah.
And it's also different reading it on your own. The first time I read this, I was so mind blown, and I was so desperate. It was like my little secret. Nobody knew I was, a couple people that had introduced it to me were the only ones, and I couldn't talk to them very often about it. And I'm like, I've got to discuss this. I've got to mine this out and figure it out. And I'm just so grateful for our group here for being able to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Session 19. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite creator. We communicate now. Questioner. I've been thinking over the scope of this book and will read this that I have thought. We are concerned in this communication with the evolution of mind, body, and spirit. I would like to fully investigate through questioning the mechanism of evolution in order to allow those interested individuals to participate in their own evolution. It seems to me that a good place to start would be the transition from the second to third density, then to investigate in detail the evolution of third density entities of Earth, paying particular attention to the mechanisms which help or hinder that evolution. This is my intent for direction of this working session. I hope that is a correct direction. What I would like to know first is, do all entities make a transition from second to third density? Or are there some other entities who have never gone through this transition? I am Ra. Your question presumes the space-time continuum understandings of the intelligent energy which animates your illusion. Within the context of this illusion, we may say that there are some which do not transfer from one particular density to another, for the continuum is finite. In the understanding which we have of the universe or creation as one infinite being, its heart beating as alive in its own intelligent energy, it merely is one beat of the heart of this intelligence from creation to creation. In this context, each and every entity of consciousness has, is, will, experience each and every density. Questioner, let's take the point at which an individual entity of second density is ready for transformation to third. Is this second density being what we would call animal? I am Ra. There are three types of second density entities which become, shall we say, inspirited. The first is the animal. This is the most predominant. The second is the vegetable, most especially that which you call the sound vibrational complex tree. These entities are capable of giving and receiving enough love to become individualized. The third category is mineral. Occasionally, a certain location, place as you may call it, becomes energized to individuality through the love it receives and gives in relationship to a third density entity, which is in relationship to it. This is the least common transition. Do we keep going?
I think let's do one more. Yeah.
Okay. Questioner, when this transition from second to third density takes place, how does the entity, whether it be animal, tree, or mineral, become inspirited? I am Ra. Entities do not become inspirited. They become aware of the intelligent energy within each portion, cell, or atom, as you may call it, of its beingness. This awareness is that which is awareness of that already given. From the finite come all densities, or excuse me, from the infinite come all densities. The self-awareness comes from within, given the catalyst of certain experiences. Understanding, as we may call this particular energy, the upward spiraling of the cell, or atom, or consciousness. You may then see that there is an inevitable pull towards the what you may call eventual realization of self.
You guys got all that, right? So any particular pieces that want to be discussed?
I've got one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us that are, you could call metaphysical or spiritual awareness, even from childhood, may have the realization of, say, a particular tree or a particular place that has become sort of aware of itself or inspirited. It's already inspirited, but then it becomes aware. And that exchange of just walking into a space that's in a forest and suddenly there's a clearing, and maybe many, let's say, humans have visited this place, and suddenly you have this, whoa, I just stepped into a sacred space. I choose the word sacred, but it could be that people over a period of time or in a community or a village or anywhere really, in Japan, there's temple gardens that have been tended to and cared for and prayed in and meditated in consistently for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So these places themselves, and especially the really old trees, that's just something I feel like a lot of us can innately relate to as being like, yes, like we may not have the analytical response to that in the same way that Ra explains it here, but we have that sense of knowing a special place or a special tree, or realizing that the energy of a certain place feels different because it's invariably changed from our communion in that space. So I just love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes energized to individuality through the love it receives and gives.
Yeah, if I may comment.
Yeah, please.
One thing that comes to mind when I read this chapter, and I've read this chapter several times because it interests me a lot. In the house I grew up in our yard, we had a row of elm trees, and the two at the ends felt like individuals to me, while all the ones in the middle did not feel like individuals to me. They just felt like generic elm trees, basically. So the one on the right end was one where we played a lot as children. We built a tree house in it and we climbed a lot. And the one on the left end was another one that me and my brothers like to climb and play in and have fun with. So we all love those trees, the ones at the end. But the elm trees in the middle, I mean, there might have been 10 elm trees altogether. The ones in the middle, we didn't play with or do anything with. So they didn't feel like individuals to me, but the two at the ends did feel like individuals. It seems like our attention to them and our love for them and our love for playing in them helped individualize them, I guess. And yeah, I could really feel that. So yeah, that's it.
I appreciate that little image of little Kent with your brothers in the trees.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's neat.
Mhm.
It's neat. As you were sharing too, I was remembering we had a big oak tree in our front yard growing up when I was growing up. And so I was just kind of putting myself in parallel to you, along with your story, putting myself in proximity to that tree, and I can still really feel that tree. Like,
Right.
it's part of me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I can
Yeah.
still feel those two trees. Right.
Yeah. That's so fascinating.
Yeah. And they still feel like individuals to me.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah, you go ahead, Sean.
Sorry. So like when we talk about like a place becoming like having gaining, individuality, like I think a lot of examples that we've talked about have to do with like holy places. How much of that is like it's hard for me to distinguish when the Dawn and when they did the original channeling, they said like the one of the houses that they were considering had like a holy aura to it because of the previous residents. But that's different from like the place gaining individuality, right? Like how do you just I'm still trying to understand like what it means for a place to gain individuality, because I feel like it's different than just being a place of worship. Like a place of worship probably has some sort of holiness to it, but does that mean that the place itself starts getting, is that linked to the place getting individuality, or is that just people worshiping there so that place has like residual energy?
Yeah. Well, I've wondered the same thing myself, and I think that so Ross says the third category is mineral, and then they refer to place. And I wonder, I don't necessarily think that it's just places in the mineral category that could begin to energize towards an individuality. Like I imagine there may be certain items, or like if I form a connection with a gemstone, for instance, like Kent is studying gemstones, or something, an antique, like I wonder, like an antique teacup from my grandmother that's meaningful to me and is on my altar. And if I develop a direct connection with it, does that begin to energize its individuality too? Yeah, I definitely don't know how this begins to happen, other than Ra says, through the love that it receives and gives in relationship. And I feel like there's probably a lot of information that we could tap into through our intuition, like our awareness is aware of awareness, and yeah, I don't have like knowledge stored in order to answer that question, but I feel like there's a lot that we could find out through our own inquiry and meditation into that. Like, how does that happen? How does a place or a mineral, something in the mineral category, begin to receive and give love? What is that?
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear about like the difference between a place feeling holy and a place feeling like it's individual, and like I mean, I don't assume any of us know the answer to that, but that's something I would be very interested in, which is like, yeah, like, is the place feeling holy the same thing as the place feeling individual, or are they two distinct things? Because like pets, right? They're not necessarily holy. Like they're just pets. So I imagine a place can be individual without necessarily being a holy place. But anyways, that's just some thoughts I had.
Yeah. Well, something that does feel parallel about pets is the ability to receive and give love. I definitely have experienced that with 2D animals. And it feels like I can feel a similar kind of thing with that big oak tree in my front yard. And I think a place doesn't necessarily have to be considered holy, I think at some point they referred to Notre Dame Cathedral. But like, for instance, like grandma's kitchen or something, like if you had enough experiences in a place that the place became really meaningful to you, it's like, this place, I get to be safe in this place, and so I'm so grateful, I share my love with this place and I receive love. Like the place begins to store love in a way. Yeah. What is that? Yeah, Rachel.
Our whole discussion, this place keeps coming to mind, and it is definitely a religious place. So I'm not answering the question about what makes it, like what the difference is between it being like a holy place and it being an individual place. But when I think about giving and receiving love and how that happens, what keep popping up is that spring and Lourdes. I cannot pronounce it, all right? And please forgive. I pray that my French grandmother forgives me for butchering everything in French, but but there's that spring and other springs where people claim to have miracles. And I think I imagine some of that might be placebo, but it could also be that place giving love. It's giving love and receiving love, and the way that it looks is through miracles. So possibly some unseen juju going on, whatever's energetic of the individuality of the place is creating the right framework for miracle healings to occur, and for people to have visions of beings, of, you know, not non-incarnate beings, etc. That's just what keeps coming to mind, and it definitely is a religious place. But there's many healing springs and rivers and wells, etc. All of the ones that I can think of that are healing or where miracles occur are one religion or another, whether it be Hindu or Celtic or Christian, etc. All of them, every every faith has their sacred natural things. But so it's kind of that story where, I mean, it's kind of the question of what came first. Was it individualized first and then it started, and then miracles started occurring, or did that start to occur because it was being prayed to and revered first? So it's like, which one came first? If that's even the case at all. But that particular spring keeps coming up for me.
I have a follow-up on that, which is well, in general, like with plants and trees, like they physically die and then probably then become incarnate as third density beings. Like, what about a place? A place just like, how does it does like, if it becomes third density being, then does that place that was originally like individualized, like, does it just lose its holy aura? Like, you know, like, it just, the consciousness that was there, it gets incarnated into a third density being, so then that place will no longer have that consciousness anymore, right? Is that, I just don't understand the mechanic when it comes to places.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't have an answer. Yeah.
That's a great question, Shang. Yeah. And yeah, I'm mystified by that too, about places being individuated or whatever you call it. And so I can see a place like Notre Dame, for example. Notre Dame is like a building and, you know, maybe a little bit of the grounds around it. You know, it has defined boundaries. But I've also been in places out in nature that felt like almost sacred to me and very special, like very high vibration. And I just come upon them and I just can feel the incredible energy and vibration in that spot. But how is the boundary of that delineated or defined? Does it have a boundary towards other spaces and other places that are next to it? Are there like cells of places that make up the surface of the planet? Or, yeah, I don't quite understand that, how that works. I just wanted to say that. Rachel, you had your hand up.
Yeah, and then I'll put myself on stack after that.
I was just going to go, I went back up to 9.1 where he says, all right, sorry. Where Ross says, within the context of this illusion, we may say that there are some which do not transfer from one particular density to another, for the continuum is finite. And perhaps places don't transfer from one density to another. Unless the planet explodes or something. I don't know. But maybe that's one of those, maybe that it covers under that statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's another piece that's alive for me too about all of this, that is like a few sessions back we were reading about like, when does a third density entity become responsible for their actions? And there's a similar kind of feeling to me here, that like, in a way, you know, before, what was it? I can't remember how old they said, but 15 months maybe?
It was 15 months. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So 15 months before that, the awareness hasn't come online. There's not like a clear I think, is my interpretation of it. And so I hear a lot the mystics talking about the I am, that the I am is like one of the sort of powerful seed thoughts of the creator that creates the potential for, separation, for being an entity of consciousness, for instance. Or that's one way of saying it. So, just to kind of come back to Shang's question about what's the mechanism, I don't know how I am works as a mechanism, but I think there's a thought of a sense of self. Like there is an I am sense that creates the potential for becoming like an entity that's individualized consciousness. But then how that happens, like I have heard, and I mentioned when we read this session, whenever that was, I've heard from different mystics talk about that desire is how that happens for us as mind, body, spirit complexes, that we are born of desire, that there's a moment when like there's something that we want. And I think that something that we want relates in a way to love. And this is super fascinating to connect it back to what Natalie was talking about yesterday. I think the soul patterns, there's different sort of flavors or directions we take the desire of and for love, and what to do with love. Yeah, but I think there's something about the I am as a seed thought that relates to individualizing. Yeah, and then the whole question about how and whether a place could then progress or, no longer be an entity, like that's super curious. Like because Notre Dame, when they mentioned it, that was when Notre Dame, before it had been burned, and then like in the past, decade or whatever, maybe it's not an entity anymore. I don't know. But yeah, I think that I think it's a thought. And I think it has to do with our thoughts being projected onto a place and our thoughts being projected onto pets that support that individualizing to happen. And I imagine, our parents' thoughts being projected onto us as babies, and then eventually we go, you're talking to me. There's a me over here, like, oh, I am this one. Yeah. But then how does it shift out of that? Maybe it doesn't. Don't know. Shall we keep reading? Okay, so we're picking up at 19.4, and then now we're talking about after the transition into third density. So how many? I think let's read through 19.8. Anybody interested in reading 19.4 to 0.8?
I'll do it.
Great.
19.4. Then after the transition into third density, am I correct in assuming that these entities would then be we'll take Earth as an example. Would the entities then look like us? Would they be in human form? Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct, taking your planetary sphere as an example. Questioner. When the first, second density entities became third on this planet, was this with the help of the transfer of beings from Mars, or were there second density entities that evolved into third density with no outside influence? Ra. I am Ra. There were some second density entities which made the graduation into third density with no outside stimulus, but only the efficient use of experience. Others of your planetary second density joined the third density cycle due to the harvesting efforts by the same sort of sending of vibratory aid as those of the Confederation send you now. This communication was, however, telepathic rather than telepathic vocal or telepathic written, due to the nature of second density beings. Questioner, who sent the aid to the second density beings? Ra. I am Ra. We call ourselves the Confederation of Planets in service of the infinite creator. This is a simplification in order to ease the difficulty of understanding among your people. We hesitate to use the term sound vibration understanding, but it is closest to our meaning. Questioner. Then the Confederation also aided in second density to third density transition. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. We must qualify correctness of this query. A portion of the Confederation which is not working with third density but finds its aid best used in other harvests, that is, second density harvest, is responsible for aid in these harvests. The Confederation, as we have stated previously in these sessions, is composed of many of those in other densities, in your own density, within your planetary sphere, and within the inner or angelic realms. Each of those entities developing a mind-body-spirit complex, and then developing a social memory complex, and then dedicating the social memory complex to the singular service to the one creator, may join the Confederation. Questioner. Well, did this second density to third density transition take place 75,000 years ago, approximate? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. And that is 9.8.
Yeah. All right. I really appreciate that part in 19.5 where Ross says there were some second density entities which made the graduation into third density with no outside stimulus, but only the efficient use of experience. I don't know what to make of it, but I really appreciate it. I mean, I guess part of what I make of it is just that that awareness automatically wants to move on this progression somehow, and there can be supportive outside stimulus. For instance, the love of giving and receiving from third density beings, but it doesn't need, consciousness doesn't need that outside stimulus, that there's just an efficient use of experience. There's like a track that we move along is kind of what I make of it. Mm-hmm. Mia.
So I've said this in previous sessions. What comes to mind for me every time is a wolf pack. There is so much similarity in the pack mentality of taking care of and individuating everyone in the pack. They don't see themselves as a colony or a herd. A pack has individualized priorities. They each have a job. They each have an assignment. They are each given more of an I am. I am the uncle or aunt babysitter. I am the alpha male, alpha female, and the parent and caretaker of everyone in the pack. I am the perimeter runner. They literally have wolves that their only job is to continue to run perimeter checks around their territory and alert if there is a breach. It's very specific jobs that's given to each of the individuals in the pack. And to me, that just shows, I mean, it mirrors humanity in so many ways. And plus the love, the giving and receiving of love, the nurturing. Wolves are so nurturing. Every member of the pack is valued, loved, and cared for, no matter if the injury or the issue. And there is this interwoven sense of I am and individuation, even within the pack. So to me, that is kind of like an automatic graduation into third once you've had that incarnation, maybe more than once, but you get to the point where you can no longer just stay in a second density understanding. You have reached that edge of evolution and graduate. That's what I think of.
Yeah, thanks. Kent?
Yeah, I just have so many thoughts here coming to me, and I don't know if I have any very pointed comment to make, but I just have so much love for our second density entities, and this gets me so excited. I think we have so many species that are like on the verge of getting harvested to third entities. Like wolves is one example. We have elephants. We have corvines, which is crows and stuff like that. We have the big apes, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and the honey badger. They're also intelligent. I mean, elephants can recognize themselves in a mirror. If an elephant looks in a mirror, they know that they're looking at themselves. So that's a sign of self-awareness. And orangutans, the same thing. Corvines actually have a language. They can speak, they can communicate, they can pass on knowledge through communication to their offspring, to the next generation. It's just so fascinating. I just love all that stuff. And I'm so excited for, if we are wanderers, I assume, I'm guessing we're all wanderers here. So, I think after this lifetime, we probably have the option of going back to wherever we came from. But I really want to stick around on Earth, to see and help the second density entities to move on to the third density. So I hope I have the opportunity to do that. We'll see. All right, Rachel.
I didn't realize I wasn't muted. Sorry.
I didn't hear anything
Yeah.
before now.
Okay, good. Yeah, so well, quickly responding to what Kent said about, all the animals being so close to graduating third density, but they might not do it here because there's not going to be third density here for a while. Or if they do it, they'll hop in after, I forget the time period that there won't be 3D, and then 3D will be coming back, but they might go somewhere else, or they might wait until 3D comes back on Earth. But it kind of bums me out to imagine like the animals graduating, not doing it here. Yeah, because they are really incredible. Really, really incredible. And I really appreciate Mia. I originally raised my hand to just say that I appreciate the wolf pack metaphor a lot, because it's much better than what I was thinking in my head, which was I was imagining like the Confederation as being like a corporation where like it's like, oh, somebody's calling us, we got to send them to HR department. like they're just it was like kind of like a Star Trek-y sort of like corporation where everyone has their own roles and stuff. But I like the wolf pack metaphor a lot better, so I was just sending my appreciation for that. And yeah, that was it.
You got a heart for Mia?
Didn't Dawn specifically ask about wolves in one of the readings?
Hmm.
I think if I remember correctly, there was a question specifically about wolves and whether they, and then Ra was like, yeah, the wolves aren't fully third because at the end of the day, their identity is of the pack rather than of individuals. Like they still, when they think about themselves, they think of themselves as the pack as opposed to like, oh, I'm Bob. Anyways, I just that came to mind.
I
I
had
don't,
a
I don't
question
remember
on
that, and I don't find it in my search just now, but that doesn't mean that it isn't there. Go ahead, Rachel.
I think I do remember that somewhere. But you stimulate a question within me now, which is like, is the different, I mean, other than having the heart open, you have, it feels like the difference between second density being individual, but also their mind being a group mind is very similar to what might be in 4D or the social memory complex, but the only difference is that instead of your group mind being one species, it's many. Is that kind of, could, like, does that make sense? Like,
Hey, are we on we're on session 19, right?
Yeah.
It's 19.15, so we'll get to it.
oh.
Oh, great. That's great. We're gonna
Well,
we get to wolves in 1915. Oh my gosh.
Or packs or tribes or whatever. Yeah.
That's great.
cool.
I missed that.
Well, let's go then.
Yeah. Okay, pack. Yeah. The packs, right. Well, and shall we continue? All right. So picking up at 19.9. I'm happy to read. Let's see. Just go back for a second. Okay. 19.9. Where did the second density beings get physical vehicles of third density type to incarnate into? I am Ra. There were among those upon this second density plane those forms which, when exposed to third density vibrations, became the third density, as you would call sound vibration human entities. That is, there was loss of the body hair, as you call it, the clothing of the body to protect it, the changing of the structure of the neck, jaw, and forehead in order to allow the easier vocalization, and the larger cranial development characteristic of third density needs. This was a normal transfiguration. Questioner, over approximately how long a period of time was this transfiguration? It must have been very short. I am Ra. The assumption is correct, in our terms at least, within a generation and 1/2, as you know these things. Those who had been harvested of this planet were able to use the newly created physical complex of chemical elements suitable for third density lessons. Questioner, can you tell me how this new bodily complex was suited to third density lessons and what those lessons were? I am Ra. There is one necessity for third density. That necessity is self-awareness or self-consciousness. In order to be capable of such, this chemical complex of body must be capable of the abstract thought. Thus, the fundamental necessity is the combination of rational and intuitive thinking. This was transitory in the second density forms, operating largely upon intuition, which proved through practice to yield results. The third density mind was capable of processing information in such a way as to think abstractly and in what could be termed useless ways, in the sense of survival. This is the primary requisite. There are other important ingredients. The necessity for a weaker physical vehicle to encourage the use of the mind, the development of the already present awareness of the social complex, these also being necessary, the further development of physical dexterity in the sense of the hand, as you call this portion of your body complex. Questioner: this seems to be a carefully planned or engineered stage of development. Can you tell me anything of the origin of this plan for the development? I am Ra. We go back to previous information. Consider and remember the discussion of the Logos from sessions 13 and 18. With the primal distortion of free will, each galaxy developed its own Logos. This Logos has complete free will in determining the paths of intelligent energy which promote the lessons of each of the densities, given the conditions of the planetary spheres and the sun bodies. Questioner: I will make a statement with respect to my understanding then, and ask if I am correct. There is what I would call a physical catalyst operating at all times upon the entities in third density. I assume this operated approximately the same way in second density. It's a catalyst that acts through what we call pain and emotion, is the primary reason for the weakening of the physical body and the elimination of body hair, etc., so that this catalyst would act more strongly upon the mind and therefore create the evolutionary process. I am Ra. This is not entirely correct, although closely associated with the distortions of our understanding. Consider, if you will, the tree, for instance. It is self-sufficient. Consider, if you will, the third density entity. It is self-sufficient only through difficulty and deprivation. It is difficult to learn alone, for there is a built-in handicap, at once the great virtue and the great handicap of third density. That is the rational, intuitive mind. Thus, the weakening of the physical vehicle, as you call it, was designed to distort entities towards a predisposition to deal with each other. Thus, the lessons which approach a knowing of love can begin. This catalyst then is shared between peoples as an important part of each self's development, as well as the experiences of the self in solitude and the synthesis of all experience through meditation. The quickest way to learn is to deal with other selves. This is a much greater catalyst than dealing with the self. Dealing with the self without other selves is akin to living without what you would call mirrors. Thus the self cannot see the fruits of its beingness. Thus each may aid each by reflection. This is also a primary reason for the weakening of the physical vehicle, as you call the physical complex. I'm going to read one more. Questioner: then we have second density beings who have primarily motivation towards service to self and possibly a little bit of service to others with respect to their immediate families, going into third density and carrying this bias with them, but being in a position now where this bias will slowly be modified to one which is aimed toward a social complex, and then ultimately toward union with the all. Am I correct? I am Ra. You are correct. They go on, but that's a lot. Go ahead, Nia.
So we have animals as we know them, second density, and then we have Homo something or other. There's like Homo erectus, there's Homo, way before Homo sapien, they're finding so many branches, y'all, of these humanoid, hair loss and Neanderthal even. So they used to, it's interesting to me because I feel like Ra is referring to Neanderthal here. He didn't say this, but, or excuse me, they didn't say this, but I keep picturing that they're referring to Neanderthal making unneeded, what was it? Unneeded for survival
Yeah.
beads, taking shells, poking holes in them and stringing them up for decoration. That has nothing to do with survival. That upright Homo erectus and Homo, all the other ones, again, there's literally like dozens at this point, that they didn't know about when we were kids. And they're now like, oh, actually, we were wrong. Neanderthal does have the ability to vocalize. It is not a cave person grunting without words. They also have found, not only have they found beads and creative workings, they have found that they're, and this is one of the points I was getting at, they the caretaking. So I actually forget about the third density service to self. So when I'm thinking of graduation to third density, my brain immediately goes to service to others. So I'm thinking of Neanderthals in the cave where somebody got an injury on a hunt and they're like, dude, this bone has grown from care. Like this person survived another 2 decades after their femur was broken in some, probably hunting accident or something else. And their longevity of their lifespan was like 35, 40 years tops, but the caretaking and then the service to others. So weaving in service to self through that is, to me, kind of obvious for second density as well, with just survival, like primal instinct to survive. So the survival of the fittest in nature of, I'm going to bully you to get more calories. If you can't fight me for this, deer steak right here, then you don't deserve it. And survival of the fittest with the DNA compulsion of service to self. However, there was obviously the service to others path with Neanderthal in a cave, because again, they've nurtured through injury, and they were like, this person didn't even have teeth. And they lived, a decade past losing all their teeth, which means somebody literally like chewed up and digested food like a mama birdie for the baby bird. And they actually say that's where human kissing came from. Like the roots of human kissing were that caretaking of our family members came from mamas chewing up the foods for our babies, and also our elderly when they would, and we didn't pass it to our hand and then hand it over. We would mouth to mouth direct, just like mama baby birds. So where service to self is woven in there is, I'm not, as third density, I'm not sure, because we don't talk much about like the progression from like lower third density to upper third density, like just coming into third density versus evolved and ready to graduate into. And then that gets into the wanderers coming back into third density. So there's a lot to weave into that.
Yeah. Well, I think making the choice, I really appreciate all that you just shared there, Nia. And just to kind of respond to that last piece, I think making the choice happens in some ways progressively along the way, but it also feels like a late third density, like we kind of build up the small pieces of the choice, but then consciously like make the choice. To me, it seems as though a late third density act.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Raw says like the change from second to third density happens in 1.5 generations. Is that because of the like the interference from like the cloning that happened, or is that just in general, like as in like regardless of the planet, that transition happens quickly because the third and density energies kick in, and it just 1.5 generations seems really fast.
It does
Like-
seem fast. Well, and
Like that's like, yeah.
they said this was a normal transfiguration, I took that to mean that it was just sort of a natural progression. But I don't know. I don't
Yeah, I'm
know.
imagining like dogs just like in 2 generations just suddenly getting up and walking, and
Yeah.
that seems really fast. At least by like if we use evolution as a baseline. But I guess this is different because something about the third density energies, you're really changing something.
Yeah. Rachel.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you guys had heard about that theory that humans evolved because we ate a lot of psychedelic mushrooms.
Hmm.
I can't remember the name of the theory. Maybe one of you guys know. I just recently heard about it, but I think it might have been Terrence McKenna or one of those
Yeah.
shroomy dudes, had a theory, and there was some scientific evidence backing it up that um, early humans or early pre-human, pre-sapiens, or I know there was a lot of interbreeding and stuff between all the Homo species, um, to get what we have today. But um, I had heard this theory that we were consuming psychedelics on a regular basis. And I can definitely see how that would level somebody up from 2D to 3D. Um, and when I see, you sometimes I hear animals like drinking like fermented fruit, and eating. There's one species of wolf that eats mushrooms in like the Scandinavian region, and it kind of makes me giggle because I'm like, are they trying to level up? But that's my theory, and I wonder if that, or that is a theory, and I wonder if there's weight to it, if that kind of evolution can happen in that short amount of time
Yeah.
that was just mentioned.
Yeah. Well, going back and looking at 1913, in the middle of Ra's response, thus the weakening of the physical vehicle, as you call it, was designed to distort entities towards the predisposition to deal with each other. And they were talking about the logos. We go back to previous information, discussion of the logos, and the logos has complete free will in determining the paths of intelligent energy. So I take all of that to mean like it was designed by the logos. How it happened, we don't necessarily know, but they're not like Ra isn't pointing towards the towards like the Confederation or any sort of like interference, I guess, other than it seems to me like the logos designed it, and maybe the logos designed it through mushrooms or berries, or somehow the logos designed it, is the way I take it, and it happened in a relatively, I guess, it seems to me like natural, non-interference kind of a way, but I could be wrong. That's my interpretation. Yeah, because I mean, I feel like Don was specifically asking that in 1912. This seems to be a carefully planned or engineered stage of development, and Ra's response was to point back to the logos and not to the Confederation or to, yeah.
So for me, it's kind of like all of the above. Like check mark yes, check mark yes, check mark. It's
Yeah.
Ra has a different sense of time space. Also having that super, I keep referring to a zoomed out perspective of a collective oneness, and our separation being illusion and yada yada. And the idea that it's yes to all of those things, we tend to analyze and individuate even the responses, even the evolutionary pieces, even this, and we separate everything out. That's how our human brains work. We continue the illusion of separation. And if you were to say, just like check marking all of the above? Is it A, B, C, or D, or all of the above? It's all of the above. It's just different in the branches, like a tree, of how and the exacts of it. And we kind of, as Roz mentioned before, a lot is transient information. It's not it's like a dog with a bone, the chew toy of how did this work? What is the exact mechanism behind it? If we want to brain crunch that. Is it as important as stepping out of, it's kind of like taking a step back. I call it getting out of my own way, because my analytical brain kicks into overdrive and I'm like, yes, I want to know that too. I need to dissect this and figure out how this is all working, specifically each piece. However, can I look back? Can I step back and look at a tree for all of its parts instead of zooming in and individuating each branch and each leaf and each piece and each cell? And to me, it's just a big lesson in stepping back and seeing the larger scale of, yes, it's all of the above. I believe that each of these pieces, including the psychedelics, like you brought up, Rachel, there's several theories around that, and you're spot on that could very well be one of the components that helped kind of fast track that, as well as the transmission, telepathy, and like all these moving parts. It's like, yes, and to all of the above.
Yeah. Well, shall we keep reading? We have 1915 coming up, which refers to the pack. Anybody care to read?
I read.
Ken?
Hopefully I won't cut out.
Yeah, you haven't so far.
Okay, 1915.
Oh, and then as soon as you started talking, you started cutting out. Oh, Kent, I don't think it's gonna work.
What?
You haven't been cutting out at all until you just started reading, and then you started cutting out. So, do you want to try it without your video? Or otherwise it might make sense to have someone else read.
Okay, I just cut out again. I better let somebody else read.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can take a turn again if we got the go around.
Yeah, go ahead.
1915. Questioner. Then the newest third density beings who've just made the transition from second are still strongly biased towards self-service. There must be many other mechanisms to create an awareness of the possibility of service to others. I'm wondering, first, two things. I'm wondering about the mechanism, and I'm wondering when the split takes place, where the entity is able to continue on the road towards service to self that will eventually take him to fourth or fifth density. I would assume that an entity can start, say, in second density with service totally to self and continue right on through and just stay on whatever we would call the path of service to self and never, ever be pulled over. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is incorrect. The second density concept of serving self includes the serving of those associated with tribe or pack. This is not seen in second density as separation of self and other self. All is seen as self, since in some forms of second density entities, if the tribe or pack becomes weakened, so does the entity within the tribe or pack. The new or initial third density entity has this innocent, shall we say, bias or distortion towards viewing those in the family, the society, as you would call, perhaps country, as self. Thus, though a distortion not helpful for progress in third density, it is without polarity. The break becomes apparent when the entity perceives other selves as other selves and consciously determines to manipulate other selves for the benefit of self. This is the beginning of the road of which you speak. Questioner. Then, through free will, sometime in the third density experience, the path splits, and an entity consciously, probably does not consciously choose. Does an entity consciously choose this path at the initial splitting point? I am Ra. We speak in generalities, which is dangerous, for always inaccurate. However, we realize you look for the overview, so we will eliminate anomalies and speak of majorities. The majority of third density beings is far along the chosen path before realization of that path is conscious. Questioner, can you tell me what bias creates their momentum towards the chosen path of service to self? I am Ra. We can speak only in metaphor. Some love the light. Some love the darkness. It is a matter of the unique and infinitely various creator choosing and playing among its experiences as a child upon a picnic. Some enjoy the picnic and find the sun beautiful, the food delicious, the games refreshing, and glow with the joy of creation. Some find the night delicious, their picnic being pain, difficulty, sufferings of others, and the examination of the perversities of nature. These enjoy a different picnic. All these experiences are available. It is free will of each entity which chooses the form of play, the form of pleasure.
We could stop there. We're
Yeah.
close to the end of this session, so I feel like if you read 2 more and then we discuss all of that, and then we can read the end and discuss all of that, that might make the most sense.
Okay. 19.18. Questioner. I assume that an entity on either path can decide to choose paths at any time and possibly retrace steps. The path changing being the more difficult, the further along is gone. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is incorrect. The further an entity has what you would call polarized, the more easily this entity may change polarity, for the more power and awareness this entity will have. Those truly helpless are those who have not consciously chosen, but who repeat patterns without knowledge of the repetition or the meaning of the pattern. Questioner, I believe we have a very, very important point here. It then seems that there is an extreme potential in this polarization, the same as there is in, to make an analogy, using electricity. We have a positive and negative pole. The more you build the charge on either of these, the greater the potential difference and the greater the ability to do work, as we call it in the physical. This would seem to me to be the exact analogy that we have in consciousness here. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is precisely correct.
Yeah. Stands out, right? This is precisely correct. How often does Ra say that? So fascinating. Ra's talking about, or Don's asking about how in second density it seems as though there's the focus towards service to self, and Ra says there's not that differentiation. When you're not able to have the abstract thought, all is seen as the self. So we require the abstraction to be able to say self and other and manipulate other in order to serve self, or choose to serve all as the self. So that's fascinating.
Right. Each question Dawn asked, it seemed like there was an incorrect. It's actually the opposite of what it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
First and second density is all about being part of the pack or tribe. Then we hit third. And even in the beginnings of that, we're just so used to being part of everything that we're still seeing other selves as our other selves. Then we hit like a bell curve. I feel like I always visualize this with the densities. It's like first, second, and then third is just this giant spike on a graph of sense of self, individuation, illusion of separateness. And then it's a downhill slide back into collective again. Fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, all of the, and then it just gets more compressed. The higher up in the densities we are, the less separation there is. Why? It finally hits as to why. Because a blink of an eye and heartbeat of the creator is so long in the other densities. So one heartbeat could be like 1 trillion years here. And we get to have catalyst. And when we are going through it, man, does it hurt. Man, does it do exactly what Ross said earlier in making us more vulnerable to pain and catalyst and emotion. And that's the driver. That every time we reflect with an other self, it's a fast track it's turbo learning, it's turbo evolution. And in each catalytic moment, we still get choice. Even if we made the choice, we still have in each individual moment continual choice towards, and reminding ourselves of that, and again with the zooming out and seeing that. So it's just fascinating to me. I always have this visual of like this giant spike of a bell curve of first, second density, this one spike for third. We're like the only ones that are individuated in that way. Now Ra does say like fourth and fifth, there is some individuation, and like Ra talks about, I think Don asked, are we interfacing with the same portion of your complex, of your social complex? And Ra responds with, there's a couple of us you see on a regular basis, but that's irrelevant because we're all one. And it's like, that's just, our brains are like, you get this little frustrated moment of, come on, Ra, can't you just answer the question straight as we understand it? No, because it's different. And we have to kind of dismantle the way we think about that. And I love how, I honor Don's line of questioning, and also you can see his struggles to dismantle those, and kind of they blasted through these so fast, doing 2 sessions a day. This is really compressed in the amount of time that they did all these sessions. So props to Don for being able to catch those minutiaes that Ross says here and there, and line up with it. And also you see him as being the third density human brain going, hang on a second, this is how we see it. Let me just ask you this again. Break that down.
Yeah, it makes me think of like the organs in a body, or even the cells in a body. If we could speak to one particular organ, it may have information. If I want to talk to my spleen, for instance, it may have information that's different from other organs, but also they're all working as one. They're all sharing information. So anything that like my spleen knows is working in harmony with, my lungs, for instance, or my heart, or my whatever. So yeah, it's like, and I have experienced that like in energy healing, as an energy healer. I can speak to any part any part of someone and get the information. Fascinating. You know, something else that comes up for me in 1919, well, 18 and 19, the piece about the further that an entity has polarized, the more easily they may change polarity. That really stands out to me. Like, it's almost as though, like, I imagine this cone, like we're walking along a cone. I don't know if this is going to make sense to you, but this was the image that came to me when I was reading it earlier. Like, I can choose on one side of the cone. Let's say up is positive. So I'm walking on one side of the cone, and it's like pretty big in this part of the cone. And so in order to flip to the other side, there's a lot of like work that I need to do. But as we get more and more refined, the cone gets smaller and smaller. And then we're like walking on a tightrope, and we can just like flip, 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 between, you know, positive and negative. And that's because of the power, you know, the power that we have built, and the power of our awareness, is the way that I understand it. And so what keeps us, at least the way that I make sense of it, what keeps us on, like, you know, the right track, or the track that we choose, is that choice, is our desire. And so we have to build that desire to stay serving, you know, serving others, or serving all, as opposed to manipulating and serving self. Like, the desire has to grow. It kind of feels to me similar to how, you know, the mechanism of like needing to like lose our hair and become more physically weak, because then, you know, it was a mechanism. Like, it feels as though the ability to change polarity perhaps is a mechanism to build our desire. Like, we have to maintain the focus of desire. I will serve. I want to serve others, you know? Yeah. That's just the way it occurs to me anyway.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar when we came to that passage. And I remember the first time I read this, I didn't fully get it, but as we were reading it today, it seemed very intuitive that if like, me personally, I feel like I know when I'm making a choice that's service to self. It's very obvious, like, or at least like the option to make those choices. It's like, oh, this is gonna fuck that guy over. Like, do I really want to do this? And like, I think that is what Ross says is totally right. Is like, the further aware you are, you really see, like, there's a lot of grayness in service to others, I think, and that like there's a lot of different ways to serve others. But it's very clear, at least to me, in most cases, of like when a choice is consciously service to self.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I could do that. That's really gonna fuck this guy over. I could totally do this. And it's because of the obviousness of that choice. I think the more aware you are, the more obvious it becomes. So it's really like Ross says, if you wanted to suddenly one day just turn evil, you would know exactly all the things you need to do. As opposed to someone who's not aware, maybe it's not clear like what choices would polarize you one or the other. But I think the more aware you are, like, oh, you want to be evil? Yeah. And in just a few weeks, you could become the most evil person.
I heard that like it was a advertisement or something. In just a few weeks, you too can become evil. Home study course. Well, I think in order to, it doesn't make sense, I think, to start next week with just a few questions in session 19. So I think let's finish this session. Keep reading. I think it's you or me, Rachel, unless you're willing to read and available to read, Sean.
I'm still on my phone, unfortunately.
Great.
I can read.
Go ahead,
Where
Jill.
were we at?
We pick up at 1920.
Okay. Questioner. Oh, wait. Okay, questioner. This would seem then that there is a relationship then between what we perceive as physical phenomena, say the electric phenomena, and the phenomena of consciousness, and that they, having stemmed from the one creator, are practically identical but have slightly different actions as we inaudible. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. Again, we oversimplify to answer your query. The physical complex alone is created of many, many energy or electromagnetic fields interacting due to intelligent energy. The mental configurations or distortions of each complex further adding fields of electromagnetic energy and distorting the physical complex patterns of energy. The spiritual aspect serving as a further complexity of fields, which is of itself perfect, but which can be realized in many distorted and unintegrated ways by the mind and body complexes of energy fields. Thus, instead of one, shall we say, magnet with one polarity, you have in the mind body spirit complex one basic polarity expressed in what you would call violet ray energy, the sum of the energy fields, but which is affected by thoughts of all kinds generated by the mind complex, by distortions of the body complex, and by the numerous relationships between the microcosm, which is the entity, and the macrocosm in many forms, which you may represent by viewing the stars, as you call them, each with a contributing energy ray which enters the electromagnetic web of the entity due to its individual distortions. Questioner, is this then the root of what we call astrology? Ra, I am Ra. This will be the last full question of this session. The root of astrology, as you speak it, is one way of perceiving the primal distortions which may be predicted along probability possibility lines, given the, shall we say, cosmic orientations and configurations at the time of the entrance into physical mental complex of the spirit, and at the time of the physical mental spiritual complex into the illusion. This then has the possibility of suggesting basic areas of distortion. There is no more than this. The part astrology plays is likened unto that of one root among many. Questioner, I have two little questions here at the end. Do you want me to read this part? It's about Carla.
Anybody care about the contact,
It's about Carla's shoes and
yeah,
eating and her diet.
I think we have skipped that in the past.
Yeah.
Maintenance of contact. Skip it or
It
read
says,
it?
Roz
Skip it.
telling Carla not to
Skip
smoke
it.
weed.
Let's
Okay.
skip it.
Well.
Great. Let's skip it. Okay. So let's discuss.
I am laughing. We're not reading it, but I am laughing at Roz saying there are substances ingested which do not aid the individual in the service it has chosen, this being that which you call the marijuana.
The marijuana.
It makes me laugh because it sounds like such a dad thing, or like, I don't know, like it reminds me of those reefer madness days where it's like the marijuana, the reefer.
Yeah.
It just makes me laugh.
Yeah.
There is one activity which affects its abilities positively. This is the sexual activity, as you would call it.
Yeah.
Very poignant point.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about, the contact maintenance, I think a lot of times Ra is speaking more generally to us, as an Earth Collective, or sometimes as wanderers, or sometimes, as beings who would be interested in this material. But in the contact maintenance, I think one of the ways that it's, we can skip over it because they are speaking directly about Carla, it may not necessarily be true for everyone that the sexual activity is advantageous and avoiding marijuana is not, or whatever. Like, it's I think when they're talking about Carla, they don't have to be in the generalization of what's beneficial. So,
Right, I agree. That's a very valid point. What is true for Carla is not true for others. It's very specific to
necessarily, right.
contact maintenance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what stands out to me is the paragraph in 1920, at the end of 1920, that stimulated the question of the root of astrology. Instead of one magnet with one polarity, you have in the mind-body-spirit complex one basic polarity expressed in what you would call violet ray energy, which is affected by thoughts of all kinds generated by the mind complex.
There is so much there with that, so
I
many
know.
layers of metaphysical content that's the basis of spiritual practices and religions the world over, eons over. Is exactly that. Plus, Ra talks about, and this really stands out for me, the lower astrals, that every one of our thoughts becomes a thing, the thought form. It ends up in a form of existence in the lower astral. So anytime we've gotten really mad and cursed someone for their driving, we always use that as an example because that's something most of us have fallen into at some point or other. It's a pretty common one. Like, yeah, like, oh no, like we've cursed, the idea of curse words. Like we have put a hex or a curse upon this person with our thoughts. And that, as most of us know, that thoughts equal the vibrations equals the things. It equals the field. It equals our experience and our reality. And we're looking into the implications of positively oriented, positive thinking and love vibratory out. And we do these things in groups and collectives on purpose to continue to pray and meditate and in group, the cubed effect times 2 times 4 times, it's not just doubled. It's, I forget what the math behind that was, but
Exponential, maybe.
yeah, but in our thoughts processes, same thing. They're going out in the lower astral. So our indigo ray is it the indigo ray? Violet ray? Where are we?
Violet ray.
Violet ray, thank you. The sum of the energy fields. It,
Mm-hmm.
thoughts of all kinds are generated by the mind complex through the distortions of the body. Like that's an infinite process in and of itself of the creator and creation and existence as it is. So that's just,
Yeah.
I love the simplicity and it and I want a brain crunch more around the mechanisms. Come on, Rob. You shouldn't have to ask. Just tell us, man.
Fascinating.
I really feel humble when Ross says he's there, or when Ross says they're oversimplifying, because I still don't get it half the time, or it takes
Yeah.
me a long time to really digest it. And it kind of just puts me in that mindset, that realization that I'm a child. Like there's like a childlike learning going on. Because what Ra thinks is oversimplifying is like medium to advanced level stuff for me, especially when it comes to electricity.
Yeah.
I learned that with The Secret of Light.
But that's also because he's talking to Dawn, and Dawn is an engineer.
Yeah.
And if you were
true.
talking to someone else, like this is very Dawn specific language. It's designed for someone who knows this, like as a background, right? So we're
Yeah,
all at a
true.
disadvantage.
Yeah. That's true. And I also appreciate what you're saying, Rachel, that like, it's sort of like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, right? And, I think that, I think of that quote from Ra too, that, it is imperative that the entity realize that it doesn't understand in order to graduate this density, because this is not the density of understanding. And I think, our minds do divide out into into abstractions, so everything seems separate. And I think we do over complexify in a way because of that. It's our strength, but it's also our weakness. So yeah, I really appreciate the sensation sort of being small, being a child, the sort of humbling of that. I think it kind of, in my body, it feels like sort of a right sized, like when I feel small in the cosmos, there's a way that that's appropriate,
Well said.
And
I like that.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
it reminds me, like, I got to this point in my spiritual path, like I was just gobbling. I have since I was a teenager. I could not stop mind feeding everything, just every book I could get my hands on, and every class I could take. And, I'm just diving, 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 diving. And I finally got to this point, even somewhat recently, that I kind of just had to stop for a moment, just shut the brain down, because the more I learned, I didn't know. Just like Ra talks about, is this astrology? And it's like, look, that's just one of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of understandings that we could take, analytically speaking. It's just one branch on this tree of infinite branches and leaves. Having said that, that moment of, I finally hit a moment of too much, and I never thought I would get there this lifetime. On one hand, I have this, like, I'm running out of time. This life is not long enough for me to gobble up everything I want to learn and mind crunch this. The flip side of that is, I just want to experience. I just wanted a moment to just breathe and be, which is half the purpose of meditation, to empty the cup, of mind, to get, feed it all, analyze it, crunch the data, then let it go. Find that stillness and be. So it is seemingly opposite and part of the whole, all in the same go, to have both.
Yeah. Well, we're technically over time, but we haven't heard from Kent in a while. Just want to see if there's any last thing you want to say.
No, I'm just enjoying listening to you all.
Great.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you for asking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm gonna call it there. Thank you
All
all.
right.
Juicy conversation. What an honor. Love ya.
Love y'all.
Love you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
guys. See ya.